what is different today than in the last 2,000 years of Jewish history is that today we are back in our own land, in our own state, and we have the capability, and not just the capability, also the determination, which is very important, to defend ourselves, and we can do it by ourselves. And for that, I can only thank each and every one of you, because we don't take this for granted, that the great alliance with the United States and how important you are in strengthening Israel, in strengthening the Jewish people. And as I know, as loyal and proud Americans, I also very deeply understand that also you do it for the sake of strengthening the United States and our, I would say, Western civilization values, and certainly interest of security, safety, and stability, prosperity in the world. Let me first maybe tell you why I'm here, particularly at this time, and then we'll touch maybe two more issues. One is U.S. American, and the third one is the UNGA, which is upcoming, and the current situation of Israel's standing in the world and our foreign policy and foreign relations. So the first thing, I'm here for two purposes. On Sunday, we have the donors meeting for the Palestinians, and I will represent the State of Israel. This is a meeting which takes place twice a year, but the most important meeting is in September here, on the edge or on the fringe of the UNGA. This is headed by the Norwegians, and there the main purpose is to take a stock taking of the Palestinian economy and how they can continue and take care of their people. And here I'm sorry to say that the report is not very good. We saw the World Bank report and other financial institutions report. We see by the own admission of the Palestinians how bad their economy is, how bad the deficit is, and one can only ask, why is this deficit so bad? Of course, the instinct, unfortunately, of the Palestinians is to blame Israel or the quote-unquote occupation. But if you really look in the details, you understand that the, I would say, the careless or irresponsible handling of the finances by the Palestinian is the main culprit. If the Palestinians, on the one hand, have no money, so they claim, to pay their teachers and to pay their security forces and any other officials, but at the same time they pay 12,000 shekels a month to a terrorist or a prisoner's family, those who murdered Israeli kids and women, then it doesn't add up. 12,000 shekels, which is 6 times more than the average salary in the Palestinian economy. So this is something which I'm going to bring up to the international community, let alone the fact that the leader of the Palestinian Authority, currently Mr. Abbas, is hardly a 5 days straight in the territories. He is flying the world over. He's not flying by himself. He's flying with a very, very large entourage. And if you add up the expenses that he accrues, it is also very substantial, which could have helped the Palestinian economy in the area. We do not see also a very good fiscal responsibility or monetary one, and certainly not governability. Unfortunately, we have today a debt of more than 700 million shekels of Palestinian Authority to our electric company, not to mention other Israeli suppliers like energy companies and hospitals that also have a great debt by the Palestinians. And this shows how the Palestinians right now, as they try to claim a statehood unilaterally, but do they really meet up the criteria of a statehood? That meaning having a territorial agreed area which they don't, a full control over the area. Right now, by their own admittance, they cannot collect taxes, they cannot collect bills for electricity or water or anything else. And without Israeli operation in Judea and Samaria, I'm not sure that this Palestinian Authority would have survived even one day, as they did not in Gaza, that in 6 hours the Hamas took over back in 2007, when they were outnumbered by Palestinian Authority people 10-1. So these issues will be very, very important to present to the international community and to the donors community as well. Again, the most convenient knee-jerk reaction is to put the blame on Israel, but if we are responsible, if we are looking into the issue in a serious matter, we have to judge it differently and accurately. So this is what I'm going to mention there, and I'm also going to call on the donors committee to work together in a coordination. Right now, there is a very, I would say, sporadic and certainly not cohesive campaign. We have different countries which try different projects, but there is no coordination, and we would like to see a one body that manages it all. It is certainly our interest to help the Palestinian economy, certainly out of our moral duties and our moral conduct and moral beliefs, but also from a political and strategic purposes as well. And if things do not move in the right direction or in the right pace or fast enough, we have to look the maladies of the Palestinian Authority, and I hope the donors countries will look at things differently, certainly with coordination, and also when we look at the shortfall of the Palestinian budget, we also have to be very frank and honest, not only with ourselves, but also with all the pledges, mainly those who are made by the Arab countries, whether it's the Gulf countries, mainly, that do not pay in full, and certainly not pay in a timely manner. I think this also has to be brought up, and without any obfuscation and without any political correctness, if we want to remedy the situation. And I think it is important to all of us to remedy the situation. Unfortunately, not only we see that the Palestinian Authority is not very responsible when it comes from the monetary or the financial aspect, but also politically, as they refuse consistently to sit with us without preconditions, directly, to talk honestly about the whole array of issues between us. They do not do that. They find different excuses not to do that, and at the same time they try to blame us for the stalemate in the political process, and to boot, it is like to add salt to injury. They also conduct a worldwide campaign of delegitimization of Israel, incitement against Israel, calling for boycotts, and certainly trying unilateral steps, including here in the United Nations. I mentioned before how, from an objective point of view, if we use the same yardstick to all countries and to all political entities in the world, then the Palestinians do not meet the minimum standard for applying for a statehood status. But worse than that, there has not been a precedent in history, and certainly not of the United Nations or the preceding body of the League of Nations, when a country or any political entity unilaterally came together, irrespective of the neighbors, or certainly when you have a conflict, they do not iron out all the differences between the two parties before you go for endorsement in the United Nations. Without belaboring too much, the latest example is South Sudan. South Sudan, after 3 decades of bloody wars, which cost the lives of 2 million and more injuries, before South Sudan was admitted to the United Nations, they came to a bilateral agreement with the North. And only when all the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted in the agreement, in the bilateral agreement, only then you take it for endorsement by the international community. You don't do it the other way around. It has never worked. It will never work. So this is basically what we ask from the international community, to apply the same standards as they did with South Sudan and many countries before, as with the Palestinians. And the Palestinians have their choice. If they do want to fulfill their national dreams or national objectives, the road goes only through negotiations with us in Jerusalem or in Ramallah. They will not find solutions, not in the halls of New York, not in Geneva, not anywhere else. I think this has to be understood, because if they do that, not only it will wreak havoc with the international community norms, with very bad precedent, I believe also it will be very detrimental to the effectiveness and also to the credibility of the United Nations. Unfortunately, they do have an automatic majority. We saw this majority as it presented itself in Tehran in a very outrageous way. But we know that. We know that 22 Arab League countries, together with the 57, or part of the 57 OIC, Organization of Islamic, and many non-aligned, who also, as a matter of tradition and also maybe political pressure of oil-producing countries, are voting with them. So even before they come to the UN, they have 120, 130 votes with them. But this is not enough. And I believe that the Palestinians will not submit a resolution to recognize them as a non-member state if they do not have the support of the meaningful, significant countries, namely the WEOG countries, the Western European and other group, which includes, of course, the United States, Japan, Korea, Australia. So I do not know yet whether Abbas will go that route or not, but I'm quite certain that without the support of the Western countries, he will not want to be embarrassed. Yes, formally the resolution can pass, but the resolution without the support of Permanent Security Council members and without the support of the significant countries will be even less meaningful, and he may be deterred from doing that. So in the foreign ministry, what we are engaged now vis-a-vis the GA is exactly explaining the dangers of going unilaterally, and also the way to avert it in a way of not supporting this. And I believe by not supporting, we will not get ourselves into a very, very difficult situation, which will really be a trap and will be basically the end of any political process and a possibility of political process with the Palestinians in the future. Because once they are armed with the UN resolution, which you and I know are meaningless and virtual, but still, no Palestinian leader in the future will be less patriotic or less how should I say it? Committed, okay, than the UN, even though we know how many resolutions there that have no meaning whatsoever. So this is the agenda that we will present on Sunday at the donors, but also to the GA as we're starting the GA. So this is the first reason I'm here. Second one, and I think this is a very important one, is to present the case of Jewish refugees from Arab countries, a very, very sensitive and deep issue, which has been, for reasons that I cannot really explain, certainly not publicly, been neglected by successive Israeli governments from the get-go, 1948 and on. And the Jewish refugees tragedy was a tragedy that befell on them because of intransigence and provocation by the Palestinian Arabs in 1948 or even before, and also by their home countries. We have to remember that Jewish communities throughout the Middle East were very prosperous, were very, very successful in the last 2,000, 2,500 years, way before the Islamic occupation that came about 1,000 years later. Still, they lived in all these Arab countries as loyal citizens, law-abiding ones. They did not pick up arms against their neighbors, as the Arab refugees did in Israel, then Palestine. Yet the Arab League in 1948, June, decreed that their citizenship will be stripped and all their bank accounts will be confiscated. Most of them were expelled, penniless, leaving behind all their possessions, let alone pogroms that took place. The most notable one is the Farhud in Shavuot of 1941 in Iraq. But not only that, there also in Lebanon, in Libya, in Algeria, in Morocco also, in Egypt, certainly in Syria. Why the issue was not prominently exposed, again, it is beyond my comprehension. But why is it now important? First of all, it's never late. It's better late than ever. Secondly, we owe a moral debt to these 856,000 Jewish refugees from Arab countries. First of all, to recognize the tragedy, the wrong that was done to them, and this is the first mission. So they will be recognized. To that end, I have proposed a government resolution, which I hope will be adopted in the next few weeks, of declaring a special day in the calendar of a recognition and memorial of Jews from Arab countries, their heritage, of course, their tragedy as well. Secondly, to build a museum in Jerusalem for their heritage. And the second reason why it is so important to do it right now, why is it so urgent, is because they are growing old. And certainly, if we want to take their testimonies and register and authenticate everything, it's very important to do it, and this is what we have started to do right now, and the project is going very well. I know that certainly it cannot be this issue neutralized from the bigger picture of the process between us, or lack thereof, and the Palestinians, and also the region itself and normalization with the Arab countries. It has been quite understood and determined that no peace can come between us and the Palestinians without resolving the core issues. And I submit that the most sticking point is the refugees, even more than Jerusalem. And it is important for everyone to understand, then we talk about refugees. The refugees are not only on one side, but on two sides. And if we do want to resolve the refugee issues, we have to use, again, the same yardstick. This is the right thing to do. And so with the campaign for Jewish refugees from Arab countries is a campaign about the truth, about historical facts, about correcting a wrong, about justice, and about their rights. And the rights do not fall in any way by the rights of the Arab refugees. I was very much encouraged by the statement on the suggestion of President Clinton in 2000 in the Camp David to create an international fund for compensations for all refugees in the Middle East, both Jewish and Arab. I believe this is the only solution. There shouldn't be any fantasies and any misleading that refugees can go back to where they started. There is no such precedent about that in the world. There were more than 20 million refugees in Europe following World War II. There is not a case where they were not received in the places of their displacement and be accorded full rights civil rights, citizenship, and everything else. I suggest that the model of treating with the Jewish refugees in Israel will be the model for treating Palestinian refugees in the Arab countries, namely accepting them into the society, especially as there is no difference when it comes to the mentality, to the culture, to the even language or religion. So for 65 years, we've seen the Arab refugees being mistreated in subhuman conditions in refugee camps. And again, there is no precedent in history that you can actually inherit the refugee status, not just first, second, third, fourth generations, almost to in perpetuity. This is also very wrong, and indeed, it should do well by them if they will be treated as human beings. It's not just in the Arab countries. I think the absurdity is that even in the areas of the Palestinian Authority and in the area of Gaza under Hamas, there are still refugee camps. So one cannot but wonder if these poor people were held as hostages or as pawns in the political fight against Israel. I think after 65 years, we should put the truth, and we should also suggest what is the model of resolution. I hope this will be the case, and for everyone who believes that a peace with the Palestinians cannot come about without resolution of the refugee problems, they should support this, because refugee problems, if you resolve it, Arabs and Jews, that would be really a great platform to move ahead, and also for normalization between Israel and the Arab countries. So this is something that we have to 65 years almost late to do, and this is why on tomorrow we're going to have the first conference about Jewish refugees here in New York at the United Nations, following the first conference we did in Jerusalem about 2 weeks ago. And this will be, from now on, the marching orders of our ambassadors worldwide, and certainly our ambassador to the UN here and in Geneva, to bring it up every General Assembly. I'm not kidding myself. It's not something that will be resolved tomorrow, maybe not even in a year, but we have to stake the claims, so when we come to this auspicious moment of bilateral relations and hopefully an agreement, these things will be there. By the way, we have not only the precedents, we don't have only justice and morality to our side, but also the international legal framework. And I would not go too far back, but I think that the pivotal resolution 242, UN Security Council resolution, upon which any future architecture in the Middle East will be based, certainly between us and our neighbors. 242, this resolution calls for the just solution for all refugees in the Middle East. It didn't say Arab refugees, it didn't say anything else, all refugees, and this was purposefully put there because refugees, meaning on both sides, Jewish and Arabs as well. So this will be our message also to the GA this year. This is the second reason why I came. And of course, besides seeing you here and wishing you a Shana Tova, now, one important issue that I want to also discuss is the US-Israel relations. And I think it is important for anyone to understand, friends and foes alike, that the ironclad natural alliance between Israel and the United States is here to stay. It's here to stay because it is important to the United States, it is critical for Israel, and it is vital for stability and security, not only in the Middle East, but also beyond. Unfortunately, we have been witnessing in the last few weeks of some kind of noise of maybe ill or not very well judiciously planned remarks on both sides, whether it's from Jerusalem or from Washington. But this certainly does not depict the true friendship alliance and also the unity of purpose between Israel and the United States. And when we look on the issue of Iran, I can tell you that we and the United States see eye to eye on the danger coming from Iran, the ramification from this danger, and also a very steadfast and strong resolution to prevent Iran from becoming nuclear. Now, if there was some misconstrued statements that may be perceived as Israel prodding the United States for action against Iran, this is totally wrong. This is totally wrong. Israel and the United States are on the same side. The United States is the leader of the international community, and the United States understands exactly why Iran should not be nuclear. Also, I believe when it comes to how to stop Iran, also, I would say that the understanding is much, much deeper and greater, that it may be misconstrued by different statements which were amplified not always correctly by the press or the media, and I certainly do not blame the media for that. As I mentioned, Iran is a threat to the entire international community. Israel is part of that international community, and I have no doubt that Iran will not become nuclear. I believe that the very strong sanctions, and more are needed and are planned, economic steps and also the political isolations, may take effect. Already it's taking a toll on Iran, and we have to understand that the only way to avoid an option which is not political or military will be by a coordinated effort by the international community. If the Iranians were to miscalculate and misread the unity of purpose, then they may continue to rush to the bomb as they are trying to do right now. But the Iranians, the Ayatollahs, are also very capable to flip on a dime and to stop this when they perceive a credible threat. We know it from past behavior. Back in 2003, they suspended for a while their enrichment because they were flanked by both sides of their borders, from Afghan and from Iraqi. And also, when they made threats against the US Navy in Hormuz Straits, when they made threats against Saudi Arabia not to overproduce, as to fill up the slacks from the embargo on Iranian oil, when they made the threat to block the Strait of Hormuz, when they received the message that all these are red lines, they backed down. So this is why it's important that we will continue not only to work together, and we work very well with the United States and with the Obama administration, and I can say here, without any equivocation, we have no better friend than the United States. We have no better friend than President Obama in the international community, and we are very appreciative and we are very thankful of the great cooperation, defense relations and bilateral relations between Israel and the United States. And I think the secret, or one of the secrets of the great closeness, is the bipartisan support that we enjoy here, bipartisan support which stems from a real understanding of American interests and American values. And we will never interfere in politics of the United States, although sometimes it's very difficult in this very heightened political season. But I can tell you, as the official policy of the State of Israel is to keep as far away as possible from the campaign here. For us, we do not distinguish between Republicans or Democrats. For us, you are all Americans, and this is very important to understand. So if there was some misunderstanding or misreadings, it's important to set the record straight. So I have no doubt that we will continue to work together with the United States, because not only because it's the right thing or the moral thing to do, it is the imperative thing to do if we think about a world which is free of mortal dangers like the possibility of the Ayatollahs and Iran possessing nuclear capabilities. Last thing I want to mention, of course, is Israel relations vis-a-vis the world. And let me tell you that there is a big difference. We are here in New York. We have this glass building not far away from us. And if we judge international relations by UN resolutions, of course, the picture may look very bleak. But the picture here, with all these resolutions, because of the automatic majority that we discussed, are not a true reflection of the real relations between us and the countries. And when we measure bilateral relations, not just by votes here, but by bilateral trade, bilateral investments, tourism, official visits, Israeli leaders in respective countries and vice versa in Israel, we have had one of the best years ever in many, many ways. Israeli technology and knowledge is very much sought after in all countries of the world, and this is before even the natural gas reserves that we discovered offshore in the Mediterranean. We also are participating in the positive agenda of the international community, namely, and these are the real challenges that we face for the next generation, is food security for all, especially when we talk about a world of 7 billion people today, but soon maybe 9 or 10 billion by 2050. Food security, water availability, affordable energy, health care for everybody. These are things that Israel excels in, and we very much contribute to individual countries and also to UN bodies. I myself returned just a month ago from a trip in Africa, where we have really worked together in technical exchanges and in Israeli contribution to these economies in Ethiopia, Uganda, and Kenya, and many more. We are also participating now with third countries, like with Germany. So this is kind of a force multiplier that we use Israeli, German capabilities. We are cleaning and working on the Lake Victoria, which is drying up and getting polluted. We're working on food security, agriculture, water resources, purification, recycling, and conservation, and many, many other projects in health, in technology. And this is something that I think we all should be very proud of. Israel is there, not only in Africa, but also in Latin America, also in Asian countries, in Central Asian countries. And as an OECD country today, actually, our aim is to increase our mashav, our international aid programs. And in Africa, it is especially important, not only because Africa is peripheral to us, and there is a land bridge between Israel and Africa. Also, it is important, and we have been getting many pleas and requests by African leaders to be there and also to stop the Iranian penetration. Iranian penetrations through terror, through agitation. Suffice to mention that just in Kenya, 2 Iranian agents were caught red-handed trying to activate bombs against Israeli and other Western targets. So we were told by these African leaders Iran brings us bomb and terror. You bring us capabilities and hope, and this is the real difference. So with all the challenges that we have, and we haven't talked about yet the so-called Arab Spring, which is turning to be a real bleak winter, with all the challenges and with all the threats, I think it's more important what Israel will do than what any of our adversaries, because with a good policy, with a unity in the Jewish people, we can meet any challenge, and I'm very, very optimistic, even if we have now a year which is unfolding, the Jewish year, and as I said, things have not been settled, not yet in our surroundings, not yet with Iran, but again, we can meet all the challenges. So again, I want to thank you very much for being here.
Danny has graciously agreed, as he usually does, to answer some questions. Make my usual suggestion that they be questions and brief and not statements. I think I'll take a few at a time, and while you're organizing yourselves to be called on and to get your hands up, let me ask one quick one myself, Danny.
Richard, you always ask the toughest ones. So.
Now, this one, well, yeah. What I would really like a comment from your point of view, or from the ministry's point of view, or the government's point of view, just a reaction to not the Arab Spring in general, but to the recent spate of demonstrations and violent congregations all over the Muslim world centered on American embassies and so on. Could you say just something about the implications of that development to the interests and issues that all of us are concerned about?
Thank you. Very disconcerting, very worrying, and not just the spontaneity of some of the demonstrations, but the way the terrorist organizations, whether they are the Sunni Wahhabists like the Al-Qaeda type, or the Shia militants like the Hezbollah type, the fact is that we are dealing with a phenomenon of total intolerance to the different, and total disrespect for human rights or civil rights or any values that we, in what is considered the Judeo-Christian or Western world, believe and cherish. And this is something that we have to face and speak out against. It is not time now for political correctness or of shyness, because this political correctness of shyness can be misunderstood by the perpetrators of the terror attack on the American consulate in Benghazi, or in the American embassy in Cairo, or the Israeli embassy in Cairo a few months ago, or against French, or if you remember, British embassy in Damascus. And the responsible parties are the government, and this is where we need to address our expectations. Each government should be responsible about its own area, and they, first and foremost, should protect the lives of foreign diplomats. It was very unfortunate what we have seen, but there is no excuse whatsoever to kill people for making films or making caricatures. Yes, I'm not supporting taking religious symbols and making fun of them. Not at all. But on the other hand, we cannot shut up people and certainly discard freedom of speech. I think that some movies against religion, all religions, whether it's Islam, Christianity, or Judaism, are tasteless and are wrong. But this is not a reason to act violently. And this is something that has to be changed fundamentally if we really want to see a Middle East which joins the rest of the world in modernity, in peace, in prosperity, and with civil and human rights. So I think this was a real reminder of how far we are from the so-called Arab Spring. Because Arab Spring or democracy, we have to remember, does not start nor does it end with an election. Democracy, first and foremost, is a frame of mind. It's a values which everyone internalizes. It's a matter of institutions. It's a matter of free expression and free press and civil society as well. And this is what's lacking. I think it is not too late for all of us in the international community to wake up and not to look upon this Arab awakening or this Arab earthquake in naive or romantic eyes.
Yeah. Annie, you talked about the need for unity of purpose between Israel and the United States and the concern that if the Arab world, or particularly Iran, misunderstood that there was a gap, that would not be helpful to Israel. Could you comment on the concern I have, the appearance of the Prime Minister on 2 network talk shows this past Sunday, where in effect he asked that red lines be declared when the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense both indicated prior to that they weren't prepared to do that. And the difference apparently in policy is capability versus weapons. And do you think that such appearance by the Prime Minister at this time might create that appearance that there is a break between the policies of the United States and encourage Iran to do something which none of us want to see?
Seymour, this was a very tricky question. I thought I was your friend. But I would address this question to the spokesman, to the media advisor of the Prime Minister, and I'm not on that team. But to be less facetious, I would say that the Prime Minister of Israel has the full right to make known our concerns. And he has a full right to talk about the implications of this. I'm not talking about tactics, how it should be done, but I think, again, there is a lot of misperception about how deep and how wide in scope the coordination between Israel and the United States are. So if I'm not talking specifically about any interview, but if due to some misunderstanding of remarks either made in Jerusalem or in Washington, the true nature of the relations and alliance are not understood, again, by foreign friends, I'm very sorry about that. But I'm here to say that the relations should be measured by the steps on the ground. And the steps on the ground, as far as the great cooperation and the great assistance we get from the United States, will continue, again, to the best interests of both our countries.
Could you just, 2 quick things. Could you just clarify, did Israel ask for a meeting with the president? And will there be a meeting with the president? And also, I'm reading about the Muslim Brotherhood taking over Syria, taking over in Libya, taking over elsewhere. Can you talk about that fear?
Yes, well, what's happening in the Arab world, unfortunately, is that once very oppressive, autocratic, tyrannical regimes were removed, you see all the forces and very, I would say, opposing forces in the societies come up. People may make analogy to the breakup of the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia of Tito. There is some morphology which may be alike, but it's not the content, because unlike in Eastern Europe, that these countries enjoyed some sort of democracy and human rights and modernity and progress back before World War I or in between the wars, so there was some kind of tradition to back on. This is not the case in the Middle East, in the Arab countries. Also, something which is very, very important in a difference, the difference is that in these Eastern European countries, there was no room for a political Islam or political religion. Here we have political Islam getting involved, and we see, unfortunately, how the extreme forces of Islam, which are very well organized, disciplined, and financed, are taking over. So if they, let's say, the initial move was by authentic and in a very spontaneous way by the young or labor unions, they were washed away and taken over by these extremists. This is something that all of us have to think together how to make sure that the entire people of the Middle East do not fall prey to extremism and manipulation of Islam. Since I do not remember your first question, I will move to the next one.
I'm going to repeat the first question. Was a meeting requested by Mr. Netanyahu, and will there be a meeting?
I have no idea. I don't work in the office of the Prime Minister.
Speaking about African asylum seekers and the dilemma that Israel is facing, the Foreign Ministry has really been great and is to be commended for addressing the very damaging statements that the Interior Minister has been making about asylum seekers. The ministry has been standing up for Israel's obligations under the Refugee Convention and has criticized the Interior Ministry's failure to actually hire the people who would be capable of making refugee status determinations. But the heightened rhetoric and the threats coming out of the Interior Ministry are really severely damaging the integrity and the credibility of the developing asylum system that Israel is trying to build. I'm wondering what you think could possibly be done to try to address
well,
this
we will continue to raise our voices and to make the difference. Just yesterday, actually, 2 days ago, I was interviewing with BBC London, and I was asked exactly the same question. And I will repeat here that some remarks by Israeli politicians are totally unacceptable. They're demagogic, and they are very populistic, and this is certainly not the government policy. Yes, we do have a policy and we have responsibility to secure our borders, and this is the first priority, not to have any unauthorized or illegal people enter our borders. This is what every country does. You have a big fence on your Mexican border, and Europeans do the same things. So this is something that we're doing to make sure that no infiltrators, whether terrorists or whether labor seekers or work seekers, will come in. And this is to that effect. We have built, I believe, a very effective mechanism with a fence. So this will be a deterrence to any future poor Africans not to come this way. By the way, from an international point of view obligation, these asylum seekers or refugee status is only to the first country of flight. And we receive them after they have crossed a second or a third country. So they're not considered refugees or asylum seekers, but as illegal immigrants. But this is not a matter of formality. We do not want to see any more coming because we cannot absorb them like any other country will not. Because if we do that, it will be endless. So just think that we'll have millions of Africans come. Of course, it's unthinkable. By the way, we are the only Western country that has this land bridge to Africa. So the two issues are, first and foremost, we have the responsibility to ourselves to block the borders against any infiltrators. On the other issue is those who are already in the country. With them, we must deal in the most compassionate, humane way. This is absolutely an imperative. And in the future, our plans in the Foreign Ministry is to take them back to their countries if they are safe over there. And to do that only with consensus and cooperation with the receiving countries. To that effect, also, we are investing a lot in giving them capabilities, education, so they will be able to go back to their countries and work there, and also have the countries benefited from their experience. But until and unless we find receiving countries, when they're in our country, we must deal with them with all the rights, and we, as the Jewish state, should be more sensitive than others, because we have experienced firsthand being foreigners and not being accepted with a true political asylum, especially from the shores of Europe. So the government policy here is very clear. And about enforcement, you mentioned the one minister that is responsible of enforcement. This is part of I would say the problems that we have in our governance system. I, for one, am very much for the American system, and maybe we'll have an electoral reform sometimes, so there will be a more cohesion and coordination among all cabinet ministries. Until then, we'll have to fight the fight inside the Israeli government, and this is what we do.
Okay. Danny, you may have come here for a specific purpose this trip, but of course we consider you open for questions on all subjects, no matter what you're here for. Thank you very much once again. I thank all of you. It was a great turnout, and I think it reflects the amount of concern that people have at this time and at this time of year. Once again, a Gemar Chatimat Tova.